Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of my reading, booktube stuff, bookish things, pretty much anything I want to talk about. I want to start off this week by thanking you for watching my channel, and in particular for thank you to those of you who sit through, let's say, 15 seconds of the ads that come at the beginning of my video or at the end of my video. By the way, if you didn't know, I have it set where there should not be ads in the middle. If there are, please let me know. Google is adding those without my consent, and I'll see what I can do about it. But I wanted to thank you because even though my channel does not generate much revenue, I think to date generated somewhere around $660, and that is in about a year and a half of having my channel monetized. Even though it doesn't seem like a lot of money, I want to thank you because it has allowed me to increase my charitable giving, and over the course of the last year or so I've been able to donate more money than I would have been able to charities of my choice, food banks and hospitals for cancer patients, and organizations that provide medical care internationally, and so I really do appreciate that. You know, one thing that you might keep in mind if you are so inclined, and you don't have to be on my channel or anyone else's, is that it helps the ad revenue. If you watch, you know, the whole ad or 15 seconds of the ad, that does help. But you know, you don't have to do that. You can do what you want to. I'm pleased that you made it possible for me to be able to do those things. So I wanted to tell you thank you for that. Also, I wanted to talk about my weekly reading, which, you know, is a normal feature. I don't have a lot to say. I've kind of had a really anxious week for various reasons that I won't go into, and so my reading has been pretty hit or miss this week, hoping to get back on a more solid reading schedule this weekend and really get down to some hardcore reading. But I am still reading William Faulkner's Sanctuary as a part of our Faulkner in August 2021 project. I divided this novel into 4 sections. We finished section 3 of Sanctuary, and you know, it's interesting. I'll be making a video going over my thoughts about the 3rd section of Sanctuary, which will go up for tomorrow for those of you interested and those of you who are keeping up with Faulkner in August. I've also been reading Marc Nash's new book, Stories We Tell Our Children, which are kind of, and I hope this isn't wrong, Marc, kind of thematically connected little short stories or vignettes, which essentially focus on, in some ways, the damage perhaps that parents do to children, either with the myths we tell them or the way in which we act towards them, even if it's benign or good-natured. I've been really enjoying that. And then I also started reading for the History Reading Challenge, which is being hosted by Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and some others. I'll put a link to their channels when I find them down below. I've been reading Forget the Alamo, The Rise and Fall of an American Myth. I picked this book up specifically because the illustrious Lieutenant Governor of Texas, and I mean illustrious sarcastically, literally canceled an event in which that book was going to be talked about at the Texas History Museum in Austin because he didn't like the fact that it called into question some of the reasons behind the Texas Revolution and the behavior of some of the founders of Texas, who, by the way, you should know, were racist slave owners and who were at least in part inspired to rebel against Mexico and to seek their independence to protect the institution of racism in the state of Texas, which shouldn't be that surprising since Texas rushed to join the Confederate States of America in 1861, leading to the Civil War over the issue of slavery. Feel free to fight me in the comments down below, but you're wrong if you don't think that's the correct assessment. Anyway, I've been reading that, and I really want to like the book because of I loathe Dan Patrick and this kind of right-wing editing or revision of Texas or American history, which tries to take out all the bad stuff, which might, you know, make little white kids feel bad. I'm not really into that, so I was really wanting to like the book, and it's kind of been a struggle. There are 3 authors of the book, one of whom is someone who writes books, one of whom is a journalist and a columnist, and one of whom really is kind of like somebody who connects themselves to politicians and writes press releases and things like that. I'm not trying to diminish what any of them do, but strictly speaking, none of them are historians, and in lots of ways it shows. And one of the things right now that's irritating the most is that apparently they divided up the chapters, and each one wrote a separate chapter. At least it feels that way, because you can really feel the change in writing styles, and that's been kind of hard for me to deal with that book. Anyway, there's my reading for the week, and since I'm reading a book about Texas myths, I started thinking a lot about what I will refer to as the beleaguered state of Texas right now. I'm sure if you live in the United States of America, you're aware that we Texans have an inflated sense of ourselves, an inflated sense of our state's greatness and our uniqueness in the United States of America. You might call that Texas exceptionalism, which is a more concentrated and probably more toxic version of American exceptionalism. And as a result, you know, the governor of our state, Governor Abbott, has decided that COVID can't really hurt us, and we should take no safety precautions whatsoever. Meanwhile, he's gotten COVID and is receiving relatively expensive monoclonal cell treatment to try to, you know, help him recover and or not die. Texas has a low vaccination rate. I mention all this because just yesterday, which was Thursday, I film on Fridays, just yesterday the governor announced that he would not be trying to enforce his order that schools not have mask mandates, which means in the convoluted world of legislation that school districts can now reinstate mask mandates for their students if they want to, which is incredibly important because students or kids in the United States 12 and under are not eligible for the vaccine, which means we have a whole population of people who are going to be coming together in enclosed spaces, and masks help limit the spread. If you don't believe that, please do some actual research or just think about this common sense wise. If I wear a mask and I breathe out, part of what I breathe out is going to get caught in that mask. The thicker the mask, the tighter the weave, whatever it is, the better the filter in the mask, the more stuff's going to get caught. People point out all the time, yes, but the coronavirus is smaller than the filter. That's true, but the coronavirus doesn't just come out of your mouth. It comes out of your mouth attached to water droplets or aerosols. Now, some of those aerosols are in fact small enough to pass through the mask, but not all of them are, which means if I breathe out and some of the droplets, which might contain coronavirus or might contain COVID-19, get caught in the mask, that's less droplets and aerosol in the atmosphere or out there in the air, which means people breathe in less, which means people are exposed to a smaller viral load, which means they're less likely to get sick. Now, if everyone is wearing a mask, that dramatically reduces the amount of potentially infected material there is floating in the air, and it dramatically reduces the chances of being exposed and getting sick. This is actually the science. No one ever said masks were going to stop all transmission. Nothing is going to stop all transmission. Nothing of an airborne virus. But we have to do our best to limit that, if for no other reason than to keep our hospitals from becoming overfilled with patients who are suffering, potentially dying from COVID-19, which means our ICUs and hospitals don't have spaces for people who, I don't know, have a heart attack or in a car accident in their ICUs because they're filled up with people who have COVID. If we can limit those numbers at the hospital, we can save lives, we can save the stress on our healthcare system, and everything gets better, and it's just a damn piece of cloth across your face. Rant. Anyway, so all this got me thinking about Texas and my own kind of history here in Texas. You should know that, I'm a fifth generation Texan on at least two sides of my family, or on both sides of my family. One side, probably Scotch-Irish named Dunn, the last name of Dunn, who at some point settled in East Texas before the Civil War, which means they were likely here not long after statehood was achieved by the state of Texas. In 1845. I doubt they were here for the Texas Revolution, but sometime after that. And then the other part of my family, the Bruce family, didn't arrive until after the Civil War. And I've been spending a lot of time reading about and thinking about, white colonial settlers. as a part of imperialism or European imperialism. You know, I recognize that my own ancestors are a part of that. The first Bruce we can find who arrived in the United States arrived in Virginia in the 1740s, relocated to South Carolina in the 1770s, where he was granted about 200 acres of land that had, guess what, been taken away from Native Americans and divided up for settlement. From there, his sons and grandsons moved to Georgia onto land which, guess what, had been taken away from Native Americans who had been relocated. They also then participated in the Civil War as soldiers on the Confederate side. I can find no record that any Bruces owned slaves, but it doesn't mean they didn't profit in other ways from the slave system, and it doesn't mean they weren't a part of the racist effort to keep slavery going. After the Civil War, some of the Bruces moved to northern Mississippi, where they settled on, guess what, land that at one point had been taken away from Native Americans before my great-great-grandfather immigrated to Texas in the 1870s, where he settled on land which, guess what, had been taken away from Native Americans. This is my history in the United States and my history in the state of Texas, and all this talk about Texas myths, you know, in this book and all the stuff going on with Texas has made me think about that. One of the points this book makes is how deeply ingrained this kind of myth-making and pride in being a Texan is in Texans. And I can tell you that's true. It is hard for me to speak honestly about the state of Texas and not to fall into kind of the pre-programmed, almost brainwashed ideas we have here about the state of Texas, but I am trying. Since I was thinking about Texas, and since this week, an important, or maybe last week, an important Texas singer-songwriter died, I thought I would make this week's musical selections all related to Texas. So these are all songs about Texas or by Texans. So the first one is from Nancy Griffith. Nancy Griffith is the singer-songwriter, kind of folk singer, country singer, who died recently, and her song Gulf Coast Highway is just one of the most kind of, I think, Texas-specific, beautiful songs about Texas there is. I also included a song from Lyle Lovett, another, incredibly Texas musician. He recorded a song with Emmylou Harris called Walk Through the Bottomland, which is about Texas. And then, you can't talk about Texas and Texas music without mentioning the Outlaws. So I have Luckenbach, as in Luckenbach, Texas, on my list by Waylon Jennings featuring Willie Nelson, Texan. And then another great Texas songwriter, Townes Van Zandt. I featured a song of his on here before, Poncho and Lefty. I'm not sure he wrote this song, and sometimes the song is called the Brazos River Song, which is a river in Texas, and sometimes it's called the Texas River Song. But essentially, the lyrics contain the names of all the rivers, all the at least major rivers in Texas. And then, since I really love Nancy Griffith, I put on my list a duet with John Prine and Nancy Griffith singing the song Speed of the Sound of Loneliness, which, despite the fact in the video they sing in the same microphone, which drives me crazy as someone who needs a lot of personal space, is beautiful and lovely. And we lost John Prine not that long ago also. So there you go. There's my Saturday hodgepodge. Please forgive the mask-wearing rant. I might be a little bit on edge since my wife is a building principal and my son is going to work in a public school for the first time this week and next week. I'm a little on edge about this mask thing. So, if I offended you about the mask, too bad. Wear the damn mask. Anyway, look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.